I know we all at some point in life have said, God is dead, in order to look sophisticated and cool. But Nietzsche never meant this to be used as a one-liner against the religiously devoted people, but instead was a manner to characterize the enlightenment and nihilism of the present and the coming future. Usually the explanation behind the quotation is that the European thought had been dominated by the Christian God, and with the age of enlightenment, this thought process was replaced with the scientific rationality. This was the spirit what Nietzsche wanted to portray, which is completely true, but the question is why and how did he came to say such a bold statement? I mean, it will make much more sense if the quotation is read in its wholeness, rather than only one sentence. Although this quotation was first mentioned in the Gay Science, but it is more famously associated with the book Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Nietzsche states, "The madman. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, 'I seek God, I seek God,' as many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then. He provoked much laughter. 'Has he got lost?' asked one. 'Did he lose his way like a child?' asked another. 'Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage? Or immigrated?' Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. 'Whither is God?' he cried. 'I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns. Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night continually closing in on us? God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. What was holiest and most powerful of all, that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us?" Here the madman fell silent and looked at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke and went out. "I come too early," he said then. "My time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way. It has not yet reached the ears of man. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." It has related further on the same day the madman forced his way, and there struck up his requiem aeternam Deo. Led out and called to account, he said to have replied every time, "What after all these churches, now if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God?" Now seeing from this we can see that Nietzsche saw himself as this madman. This madness is the symbol of the lost God, and when humanity finds out about the lost God, then a world chaos will initiate. We destroyed our own faith in God. There only remains nothingness. The morality that we once held is gone as the coldness of the night closes in. Nietzsche felt the agony, the suffering and the misery of the godless world. At the time, people were blind to the incoming chaos, but he was able to experience it in at once, thus literally turning into the madman. When the destruction initiated during the 20th century, it took the world back into the Dark Ages. Educated people everywhere were surprised when such an event took place, but Nietzsche had already envisioned these circumstances. He had stated in Ecce Homo that when people would realize that they were not unique as they had thought to be, when they would lose the sense of what was good and evil, then an age of barbarianism would begin, and there will be wars such as have never happened on Earth. Nietzsche's atheism is main contributor of realizing what was to come. This reaction of his was against the narrow-minded Christians of his hometown. Aunts shook their head when they saw the young man taking walks instead of going to church, and the uncles who were shocked to see him read Voltaire offered him better books. It is obvious that the influence of one's social background is often connected with the work they produce. His insight of his experience brought him to say that God is dead. instead of saying there is no God. The initial wording is derived from Hegel, who also spoke about the death of God. Nietzsche uses these words along with the old image of God, implying that God once was alive, which is paradoxical in the sense that God can die. This is not a metaphysical speculation about the ultimate reality, but just an analysis of the contemporary civilization, a civilization where philosophical materialism and naturalism took the driving seat, while the belief in the role of God in human affairs took the back seat. This conclusion of the death of God gave rise to the proposition that Western civilization can no longer believe in a divine moral order. Nietzsche believed that this not only led to the rejection of cosmic order, but rejection of the absolute values, the rejection of the universal moral law. This loss of objective morality was what led to nihilism. So why Nietzsche said God is dead was just all part of finding the solution to the problem of nihilism, a solution where human values can be re-evaluated. Nietzsche believed there could be positive new possibilities for humans without God. This progression opened up new paths for human creative abilities to fully develop. Nietzsche writes that without the Christian God, human beings might stop turning their eyes toward a supernatural realm and begin to acknowledge the value of this world. Nietzsche thus introduces us with the idea of Ubermensch, which represents a new stage in human existence, the personal archetype who, through the conquest of their own nihilism, themselves become the mythical hero. The death of God is just a motivation for Nietzsche's last uncompleted project, the revaluation of all values. Sadly, Nietzsche soon after that tumbled into madness, thus began his horse-touching story. The quotation has not only led to the death of God, but according to Heidegger, also as the death of metaphysics. In his view, Nietzsche's words can only be understood as referring not to a particular theological or anthropological view, but rather to the end of philosophy itself. Philosophy has, in Heidegger's words, reached its maximum potential as metaphysics, and Nietzsche's words warn of its demise and the end of any metaphysical worldview. If metaphysics is dead, Heidegger warns, that is because from its inception, that was its fate. If Nietzsche was wrong, then at least God can reply to the quotation by saying, Nietzsche is dead. Get good, noob!